Study on the book of Acts. We're starting the 27th chapter. We have this one and one more to go, and we're going to cover these in some bigger chunks of Scripture. See 21 verses on the screen. Don't let that scare you this morning. It's narrative, so it's storytelling. There's some things we can pull from that, but we're mainly going to be looking at in these chapters, and I got to give the credit to someone who wrote a wonderful book regarding this. Dr. John MacArthur, who recently died, one of my favorite theologians, wrote a wonderful book on leadership, and it centered on the Apostle Paul. So I've taken some of my main points from Dr. MacArthur and appreciate his insights that I would like to share, with the church as well. This is going to be part one of this series, and we're going to look at many characteristics of leadership from the Apostle Paul. Just to let you know, when I started out and I was making my list in there on my desk in my notes, you would see 10. So I looked at that list and I said, no way am I doing 10. So if you look in your outline this morning, we'll do 3 of the 10 today, but it can kind of give you, if you want to read ahead a little bit, you can guess what the other characteristics might be. Leadership is one of the things that we are most missing, not only in the church, but in the world today. Now, when you hear the word leadership, people think about different things. So I don't want you to think about what your idea of is leadership, because typically when someone hears someone say, "We are lacking leaders," I think the automatic response in the mind of many people is to say, yeah, we are. So-and-so should really step up. So-and-so, or this person should do this, or this person should do that. When what we should be saying is, what should I do? You say, well, I'm not necessarily a leader though, Wes. Well, no, I think the Scripture will make an argument against that and say that, yes, you are. If you claim to be a follower of Christ, you are a leader, like it or not, and the Scripture will show you how that is. But let's look at some things regarding leadership. Our first point this morning is that leaders are trusted. Leaders are trusted, and as I say that this morning, I think about how much I would love to trust political leaders. And what a wonderful, novel thing that would be. This has nothing to do with who you support, who you don't support, or whatever. I have the people that I support politically and all that. If you ask me, do I trust them? About as far as I can throw them. Yeah, no, I don't trust them. So don't get confused on different concepts as we look at this. And we're not looking at leaders as the world looks at leaders either. These are leaders as the Bible defines leaders. That's all I truly care about. How does the Bible define leaders? That's the type of leader that I want to aspire to, and that's the type of leader that I want to follow. I'm not truly concerned about the short term of this world. I'm not concerned about political systems necessarily. I want things to go well in the place that I live and operate and things like that. But my primary concerns in life are not with the physical, they are with the spiritual. My desire as I live my life is not that we live in a prosperous nation so much as that I live in a place where people are learning who God is and honoring Him with the honor that He deserves. That people are coming to know Jesus, that are hearing the gospel, and that their lives are being transformed, and that they're, for lack of a better way to say it, punching their ticket for the kingdom of heaven. That's the business that I am in. It's not a physical, worldly business. It is a spiritual business. Your souls and my own are my chief concern. That's what I'm trying to say with all those words. Leaders are trusted. Now, the world does not disagree with me on this. They may have some different concepts and ideas, but most of the world in general agrees that leaders should be trusted. Let me share some things from you, from not the Bible, but from a but from a worldly perspective. So here's some trust-based key leadership characteristics according to the world. Now, some of these are also according to the Bible. I'd say they're all according to the Bible, but here's some things that the world agrees with us on, okay? The world will say that trust-based key leadership characteristic of integrity is something that people want in their leaders before they want to follow them, before they want to trust them. What is integrity? Well, you can define integrity in a lot of different ways. I like to think of integrity as a person who does the right thing all the time. A person with integrity, I'll do what's right when people are watching me, but what's more important, I will do what's right when nobody is watching me, when I know it's just me and God. I'm the same person regardless. Transparency. Now, some people like their privacy. I understand that. I understand that some people like your privacy. You can like having your privacy. You can have many things that are private. But if you are a leader of people, you cannot have a secret life. You cannot have a secret side life. And what's the thing that gets so many of the leaders in the world in trouble that we see? We find out we thought somebody was this, and surprise, surprise, they had this secret life. And it's not even a surprise anymore, is it? I mean, we just eventually expect it. But a person who lives a transparent life, I try to do that as much as I can, to not have any secrets, nothing that I think I've basically got to the point that nothing I can tell you about me is going to shock you. I think most of the time I think I'm going to say something like that. People are like, yeah, that's pretty much what we figured. Anyway, transparency. Another trust-based leadership characteristic is consistency. You see, all these things are tied together. They're not exactly the same, but they're very similar. Is a consistency. I think when I think about consistency, the first thing that always comes to mind is my grandparents. They were the most consistent people that I ever knew in my life. And what I loved most about being around them was I knew what I was going to get every single time. You know, Grandma and Grandpa, Grandpa had his kind of crotchety moments and stuff, but like I said, he was consistent in his crotchety moments. So we knew that they would happen if you brought up certain things or if you did certain things. You knew that those things, I knew exactly when Grandpa was going to be upset with me, when he wasn't going to be, when he was going to be pleased with me. My grandma was just a consistent picture of love and grace. Something that people want. Sorry, it makes me all emotional talking about my grandparents, but like I said, is anybody surprised? No. This is something that we want in our leaders, though. We want to not be surprised. We want our leaders to be people that we can anticipate their behavior because they're so consistent in the way they live. Competence. Another trust-based characteristic that the world wants. Like I said, these things relate to the church as well, but these are things that the world agrees with us on. We want our leaders to be competent. In other words, we want them to know what they're doing. Doesn't always appear that way, but a lot of people still want competent people to lead them. And lastly, compassionate. We want them to not only care about themselves, but to care about the needs of others. As a matter of fact, that's what I want most out of leaders, is people. If you get a leader that thinks and operates in such a way where they care primarily about themselves, man, you're in a bad situation, because that person is always going to do what is best for them and what suits whatever their desires are above yours. We expect leaders, and especially in the church, we expect our leaders to have compassion at such a level that it's similar to that of Christ, where we think of others before we think of ourselves, and we try to model that. Now, if I was writing a book on leadership, there's a few people that come to mind that I would write a book upon, and I might do that someday, because there are some people that just stand out to me in the Bible. We have great examples of leaders that characterize all these things in the Bible. But I will say this, even in the Bible, even some of the people that we admire and look up to the most and can learn a lot of lessons from, we look at their lives. I'll take David, for instance. David was a lot of good things, but was he a good leader? I would argue absolutely not. I don't think he was I think I could make a very strong case for why David wasn't a great leader of people this morning. But there's some that are. Joseph is the first one that comes to mind. Considering the list of characteristics there, Joseph meets every single one of those. And Joseph is a great guy to look to as a spiritual leader. Daniel, in a different set of circumstances in life, even going all the way back to his youth. I mean, the teenage Daniel was a greater leader biblically than we see from the majority of people in the Bible. A person who had all those great characteristics. But lastly, and the one that's in our text today, is we will look at the Apostle Paul. Now let's look at the beginning of our text here and see how the Apostle Paul, how we can see that trust demonstrated, how he was a leader that could be trusted. Verses 1 through 3. When it was decided that we would sail for Italy, they proceeded to deliver Paul and some other prisoners to a centurion of the Augustan cohort named Julius. And embarking in an Adramyttian ship, which was about to sail to the regions along the coast of Asia, we put out to sea, accompanied by Aristarchus, a Macedonian of Thessalonica. The next day we put in at Sidon. And Julius treated Paul with consideration and allowed him to go to his friends and receive care. Let me unpack the scriptural part of this for us real quick, and then we'll look at the point. Remember, we're kind of where we left off. Paul has appealed to Caesar, and it was told to him, you have appealed to Caesar you must go. Now, years before this, the Lord revealed to Paul, you will be my witness in Rome. So Paul knows that he's going to Rome. However, after the Lord told him he was going to Rome, he spent years in house arrest, wondering, I'm sure, on more than one occasion, when is this going to happen? Paul keeps getting older. There's no end in sight to his imprisonment. He can't say when he's going to get out of prison because he's in prison for no reason. He's been charged with nothing, with no wrongdoing. He's just a weird political prisoner at this point. And they even said in our last verses, we may have let him go had he not appealed to Caesar. So he's finally getting going. We see I've got the word we underlined multiple times here, knowing that Luke is the author of the book of Acts. I just point that out to let you know that Luke is a physician. He is a Christian. I think he's Paul's personal physician. Paul has some medical ailments that we know of. Luke may have been traveling with him just for companionship. There's a good chance he's traveling with him because he is Paul's personal doctor. And so he is traveling with him maybe in that capacity. But long story short, he's with him. And he's going with him on this journey. Luke is not a prisoner, but have you ever heard of a prisoner that's allowed to choose people that travel with them before either? That's a weird thing in and of itself. But Luke is with him, so he's narrating the story as he goes along. Also, we have some new characters here. We have this character, a centurion named Julius of the Augustan cohort. The Augustan cohort, the very prestigious Roman cohort. A cohort is either, depending on the definition and the context, is either 500, 600, or 1,000 soldiers. He's a part of a prestigious soldier. And he's a centurion, so he has 100 soldiers under his command as well. So one thing that we've observed in the past regarding these Roman soldiers is Rome was terrible at choosing who their leader of their nation was. They were terrible at choosing, their leaders that they put over their regions. One thing that they were great at, though, were putting people of very high leadership and integrity into positions of military prowess. So their soldiers are some of the most impressive people that we read about in the Bible. As a matter of fact, there's not a single Roman centurion that you read about in the Bible that is not spoken of positively. These Roman centurions are the cream of the crop in their society. Even from a biblical perspective, they show to be leaders. So, this Adramyttian ship, this is a smaller ship that they're on. This is the first ship that when they leave, they're sailing close to the coast because this is not a ship that can take the open sea there very well. We got this guy here, Aristarchus, who's with them. He's a Macedonian from Thessalonica. And he's just kind of given the route there. And I don't have a map for you today. It's not really that integral to the story. But they're sailing along the coast there. And they put in at Sidon. And here's a very weird thing happens. Julius treated Paul with consideration and allowed him to go to his friends and receive care. Well, there's some things we can infer from this. Number one, Paul needed care. He needed to receive care. There's something wrong with Paul. He's got some, like I said, he's got some physical ailments. But who lets a political soldier get off of the ship? Like nobody would do that. You leave you leave your prisoners locked up. Prisoners don't get shore leave. They don't get freedom to separate from the group and go into town. Why this is also remarkable is that if you are a Roman soldier and you are in charge of a prisoner and that prisoner escapes, per Roman law, you pay with your life. So Julius, from what he knows of Paul in this short time that he's known him, he's not worried about Paul making an escape and losing his life. He trusts Paul with his own life. And that I think goes to show us the tremendous integrity that Paul had, the impression that he made upon others in a very short amount of time. And Paul was trusted. He was a leader that could be trusted. A leader even as a prisoner, which I think is remarkable. Next, leaders take initiative. Leaders take initiative. And this is something that we want in our leaders as well. When I see someone that I consider a leader is someone who sees something that needs to be done, and they just do it. They don't necessarily talk about it. They don't put together a committee and discuss it. They see something that can be, if they can do it, they just do it. And they don't, and that's between them and that's between God. They see that it's just basically is simply their service to God. They don't do as so many do, especially when you are in a position of leadership in the church. Can't tell you how many times I've had people come to me over the years and say things along the lines of, and these weren't bad things, but someone come to me and say, "Hey, Wes, there's something that really needs to be done." And I say, "Oh, okay." I don't, and then they share with me what needs to be done. And then I just kind of wait. And they don't say the part that they want to say. They don't say the part that they're implying. But we know what they're implying, right? You do it. Here's something someone should do, Wes. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. You do it, okay? And when people come to me and say that, I typically respond something along the lines of, "Hey, that's a great idea. I'd love to help you do that. I'd love to help you do that." You see that? I try to turn it back on them a little bit. Leaders take initiative. Verses 4 through 10. From there, from Sidon, we put out to sea and sailed under the shelter of Cyprus because the winds were contrary. We're already sailing at a time of year where people have stopped sailing. This is not travel time. When we had sailed through the sea along the coast of Cilicia and Pamphylia, we landed at Myrta in Lycia. There the centurion found an Alexandrian ship sailing for Italy and put us aboard it. Now this Alexandrian ship, we've moved from a small ship, relatively speaking. It's still, the ship they were on was still pretty big. But now they've moved to a huge ship. These are the biggest ships of the day. Alexandrian ships were, as the name implies, these were ships that were built and came out of the city, the great Egyptian city of Alexandria, for much of human history, one of the greatest cities in the world. And these were known as grain ships. When you see Alexandrian ship, think of a ship that the whole bottom section of it is completely loaded down with wheat that comes from Egypt. And so they board this gigantic ship, this Alexandrian ship, which if they're going to go across the sea, if they have any shot of getting to Italy, they're not doing it in a small vessel. They must be on a very large vessel. So that's what they do. When we had sailed slowly for a good many days, and with difficulty had arrived at Cnidus. Since the wind did not permit us to go further, we sailed under the shelter of Crete off Salmon. And with difficulty sailing past it, we came to a place called Fair Havens, near which was the city of Lasea. They are already in conditions on the sea that they should not be sailing in. They've passed the time of year when anybody makes this voyage. And they know that. This is not a surprise to any of them, even the people that aren't sailors. This is no surprise. When considerable time had passed, and the voyage was now dangerous, since even the fast had already taken over. This would be the Fast of Atonement in the late fall. Once that time came, it was a time that was known to the people then. You don't sail beyond that date. Since the fast was already over, Paul began to admonish them. So what we talk about, Paul takes initiative here. He sees a problem, and he's powerless. He's not a sailor. He doesn't own the ship. He's not in charge. Okay? So he's basically doing the only thing he can do. So here's what he does. He said to them, men, so he's talking to the Romans that are in charge, his leaders. He's talking to the people that are running the ship. They're not one of the same. Okay? Men, I perceive that the voyage will certainly be with damage and great loss, not only of the cargo and the ship, but also of our lives. Now, one thing I'll also point out here, when the Lord told Paul that you will be my witness in Rome, I think that Paul never doubted that. I think he believed with all of his heart, I'm going to make it to Rome. The Lord is going to deliver me to Rome. But as for the rest of you guys, he has made no such promise. He's given no guarantees to you. Paul's concerned that all of his buddies that are with him and all these people he doesn't know, that they are all going to die. Seeing this, Paul does what we would see as a very courageous yet reasonable thing. He speaks up and says, let's not do this. This is a bad idea. What I want you to see here is Paul has no authority, zero authority whatsoever. Most of us in a situation where we have zero authority, we don't speak up. We wouldn't speak up because after all, what's the point if you don't have real authority? Paul doesn't see it that way. With little chance of being considered. He has probably has zero confidence that his words, especially with the ship captain and those people, the merchants, that they are going to listen to him. These are professional sailors. They're merchant sailors. They do this for a living. As a merchant sailor, you don't deliver your goods, you don't get paid. He is, though I've said it many times, he is a prisoner. Prisoners have less rights than anybody. Nobody listens to a prisoner. And in spite of all these things, Paul speaks up. Now, what do I want to take from that? When I'm in situations where I feel like the situation is hopeless and I'm tempted to keep my mouth shut because I don't feel like I don't have any faith that I'm going to be able to contribute to the situation, sometimes, as I constantly repeat to my children, sometimes we do the right thing simply because it's the right thing, not because we think that we can actually do or change anything in the situation. Sometimes we speak up and sometimes we try even though we don't see where a good end can come. But a leader, a person that I want to follow, is a person that sees a situation where they think they can affect change and they try to affect change. They at least make the effort to affect change. And I can respect that. Next, we've talked about this. We've hinted around this one already a little bit today, but our last one today is leaders display courage. Leaders display courage. Verses 11 through 21. Hang with me through this long narrative, and we'll talk about it as we go. But the centurion was more persuaded by the pilot and the captain of the ship by what was being said by Paul. Now, this doesn't mean that this centurion is not a good guy, because I think he is. This just means, okay, so here I've got the Apostle Paul. What is the Apostle Paul by trade? He is a Pharisee. Okay? He's a Pharisee turned Christian, but I don't know. I've always wondered, did Paul continue to wear the official garb of the Pharisees, or when he became a Christian, or what all changed in his life? I bet you he still wore like the rabbi garb with the tassels like Jesus wore, because he was a rabbi. But anyway, so what was Paul known for? Well, he was known for being a preacher. He was known for being a theologian. That's what he did. Sure, he had a side profession, but that was making tents. What was Paul not? He was not a sailor. Okay? So Paul says what he says. I think we're going to lose the ship. I think that all of our lives are in danger. What does the captain and the pilot of the ship say? We've made this trip 50 times. We're sailors. This is what we do for a living. Who are you going to listen to? A prisoner? This preacher prisoner? Or guys who sail for a living? I got to tell you, church, I probably would have listened to the sailors too. If they said, hey, we've sailed this time of year, we've done this before, everything's going to be all right. There is a debate going on, but like I said, Paul has no authority and truly no expertise. It makes sense that they would have not listened to Paul in this situation. Verse 12, because the harbor where they were, that Fair Havens, was not suitable for wintering. It wasn't a fun town. That's what that basically means. They've got hundreds of people on this ship. They're like, we don't want to live here. We don't want to live in this little one-horse town on this island for the whole winter. There's nothing fun to do here. And it's kind of what it was. It was kind of a little small place. Nothing exciting about it. We don't want to stay here. The majority, and this you get into trouble when, let's just see what the majority wants to do. Oh man, you're in big trouble when you're going with the majority. The majority reached a decision to put out to sea from there. If somehow they could reach Phoenix, a harbor of Crete facing southwest and northwest, and spend the winter there. They're smart enough to know they can't make it to Rome, but let's make it to a party town. Let's make it to a place where there's a lot of bars and there's a lot of women and there's a lot of things we can do to spend our money, and a fun place to spend the winter if you're a ship full of men, okay? Let's get to the party town. So that's really their only goal at this point, is just to get to a better place than the place that they are. They know they're not making it to Rome at this point. When a moderate south wind came up, supposing that they had attained their purpose. See, Paul's wrong. Look, the winds are in our favor. They weighed anchor and began sailing along Crete, close inshore. That's important. They're very close to the shore. They're being careful, okay? But before very long, there rushed down from the land a violent wind called a eurykilo. Now, this word eurykilo, you would know this word today as a nor'easter. And it's not a surprise. These are still, if you go to the same area, the same geographic region today, sailors still treat the area the same way they did at the time of Paul, at the time of Christ. These winds still come down like this out of the north and keep people from being able to sail on the sea, just like they did then. So here comes the wind, and though they are close to shore, it is impossible for them to get to shore. That's how violent of a wind this is. And when the ship was caught in it and could not face the wind, we gave way to it, had no choice, truly. We gave way to it and let ourselves be driven along, running under the shelter of a small island called Clauda. Your version may also say Cauda without the L. We were scarcely able to get the ship's boat under control. They're talking about the dinghy, the little boat that hangs off the side of a big ship. Apparently that thing was being whipped in the wind and banging against the side of the ship, and if you don't get it under control, it'll bang a hole in your hull, or it'll be smashed to pieces itself. We were scarcely able to get the ship's boat under control. After they had hoisted it up, they used supporting cables in undergirding the ship. And fearing that they might run aground on the shallows of Syrtis, which was then and is still today a ship graveyard. You can go there today and go, if you have plenty of money and time, you can go there today and go scuba diving, and you can see these ships. They're still there. Ancient ones and newer ones. They're there. This undergirding that they do, this is where they put stretch big ropes over the front of the ship and tie those things off as tight as they can, basically to help the front of the ship when it bangs into the waves to keep from just blowing to pieces. So they're using supporting cables and the undergirding, fearing that they're going to run aground. They let down the sea anchor, and in this way let themselves be driven along. So they drop their big heavy anchor, and in that violent wind, that anchor is just dragging the bottom and slowing them down just enough to keep them a little bit under control. I mean, they're out of control, under control, basically, at this point. The next day, as we were being violently storm-tossed, they began to jettison the cargo. So now they are scared they are going to lose their lives. This is the only reason why this is their payday. They may end up losing their lives for losing the cargo. But hey, it's better to live and fight another day. So they're throwing the cargo off the ship, just doing whatever they can to survive. And on the third day, they threw the ship's tackle overboard with their own hands. The ship's tackle, this is what these are the tools they would use for sailing. So they've given up. Hey, what is it? We can't control the ship anyway. Might as well throw it all off. So they're throwing everything off. The name of the game here now is just don't die. I will throw one other thing in here just as we say this. This is just a self-disclosure thing from a personal standpoint. There's nothing in this world that I know of that is more terrifying to me than being on a ship, on a large body of water, in a storm, at nighttime. I can't think of it. That is nightmare fuel for me, okay? Paul is living out, and with all these other guys, he is living out my worst nightmare. And I wonder how often Paul had the thought, well, God did tell me that I would survive. I know I'm going to survive, but you can do a lot. You can experience a lot of terrible things in life and still be alive, right? And still survive. So it's not necessarily a comforting thought. Verse 20, since neither sun nor stars appeared for many days. They can't even tell if it's daytime or nighttime hardly. This storm is so terrible. No small storm, I love that, no small storm was assailing us. From then on, all hope of our being saved was gradually abandoned. Everyone's making their peace with whoever God is to them at this point. When they had gone a long time without food, and how can you even think of eating in a situation like that? Then Paul stood up in their midst, and I love Paul. I love him for this. This is so funny to me, and this is neat on so many levels. But think of the courage he had to have, because that's my point here, is his courageousness. Paul stands up and says, "Told you so." He doesn't say that exactly, but that's the interpretation. Paul said, "Men, you ought to have followed my advice." Isn't that a funny thing? "And not to have set sail from Crete and incurred this damage and loss." I told you this was going to happen, but it's important that Paul remind them that he was the only one who knew what to do, and they didn't listen to him. So Paul's not going to stop here, but we'll save that for next week. We'll save the next point for next week, because a good leader doesn't just say, "I told you so." A good leader provides a solution to the problem as well. I don't mind when people come to me and want to talk about something that they have a complaint about. What I prefer, though, is when you come with your complaint, that you also have in mind, you've also thought enough about it and been considerate enough to think out, here's what I think could be a good solution. Because we can all see problems. We can all see difficulties. That doesn't make anybody special, being able to see a problem. Hindsight is always perfect vision, right? Or for the most part. But to see forward into a solution, that's something different. That's a leadership quality. So Paul says, "I told you so." But I want to point out just a few things regarding Paul's courage here. When displaying leadership courage, we're not going to be like the world. We want to be like Christ. So when I am displaying leadership courage as a follower of Christ, here are some things I want to consider and do myself. Number one, a Christian is kind. We are kind in our assessment. Don't go to someone with a problem and start off harsh or mean, because that's going to cause problems within the problem. And how much do you like it when someone comes to you with harsh words? Usually when people come to people and talk to them about a problem, the person that they're bringing the problem to, it's not even their problem. It's not even their fault. There's not an excuse for not being kind, okay? Kindness is something we can all do, and we can all be in these situations. Next is respectful. And it kind of goes with kindness, but be respectful of the person that you're talking to. Again, small things, but these are things that we do, that a leader does. They're gentle. You can say whatever you want to say. You can get your point across without being harsh. You can be kind and respectful and gentle and say every single word that you need to say. Now, I know that's hard. I'm not necessarily known for having these great qualities, especially when I'm fired up about something or passionate about something. It's something I really care about. I get passionate when I speak, but that passion can very easily be interpreted as, "Man, Wes is really harsh." But I don't want to be like that. I want to be kind. I want to be respectful. I want to be gentle in my leadership and bringing these things. And lastly, and here's the thing that I picked this one. There's many other things I could say. I picked this one mainly to pick on myself. Is not easily angered. Too often, I am easily angered. I blame that on my upbringing sometimes. I blame that on being a redneck sometimes. I blame that on all sorts of things. But you know what? I'm an adult. And when I was a kid, I used to be able to blame things on other things. But now I'm an adult, and I have to take responsibility for myself. I put all these things together, and when you come to someone, let me just think, if you just want one word, when you come to someone as a leader in a difficult situation, just think of this word: love. Love. I mean, come to people and present whatever you need to present in a loving way. And all these other things are going to come out of love: kindness, respect, gentleness, not being easily angered. Look at Paul's definition of love in 1 Corinthians 13. You're going to find many other things there as well. But Paul is courageous, but we're going to see that he doesn't just stop with "I told you so." Read ahead in the story for next week, and we'll see Paul provides a solution as well. He is loving. He wants to save every life that is on that ship. Here's what I said at the beginning. Let me just close with this. Christians are leaders. You're a follower of Christ, whether you like it or not, you're a leader. Let me show just a couple verses. I could use a lot, but let me use 2 Corinthians 5:17 and 20. There was a time in your life you weren't a Christian. Paul says to those that weren't but now are, he says, "Therefore, if anyone is in Christ, he is a new creature." There was a you that used to be you, but now if you are in Christ, you are different. You may not feel completely different. You may not have made all the changes yet, or God may not have made all the changes to you, but you are being transformed into the likeness of Christ as you follow Him. You're a new creature. The old things, those are gone. Quick-tempered Wes, he's gone. He has to be gone. The new creature's come. Now I still have those temper tendencies, but now I take a breath and I consider people and I love people, and I'm aware of myself, so I'm trying to work with God to be this new person He wants me to be. Those old things are passed away. Behold, new things have come. Therefore, skipping down to verse 20, we are ambassadors for Christ. Think about the United States has ambassadors. The way I like to think about ambassadors, think like we have embassies all over the world, and at whatever embassy we have an ambassador there. Now, the ambassador is the person in a foreign land who speaks on behalf of the nation that they represent, okay? We, as ambassadors, we are citizens of the kingdom of heaven. We live in a place that is not heaven. We speak on behalf of our leadership, Jesus, God, the Holy Spirit. We speak on behalf of them in the country that we are situated in, which is where we are right now. We're ambassadors for Christ, as though God were making an appeal through us. We beg you on behalf of Christ, be reconciled to God. That is our chief end. That is what we live for as Christians in this life, to glorify God and to let Him be known in this world. So I ask myself the questions. Am I trusted? As a spiritual leader, am I trusted? Do I take initiative? And as I'm asking these to myself, the point is that you ask them to yourself as well. Do I take initiative? Or do I try to push it on to somebody else? Or do I ignore the problem? Do I display courage when courage is required? Now, these are not trust as the world sees it. Again, this is not initiative as the world sees it, or even courage. These are from a biblical perspective. Do these things describe me in the way that I represent Christ as His ambassador? We're all called to be leaders. We're all called to do these things on some level. Some more than others, yes, but all on some level. We're all called to be leaders. May God make us the leaders that we've called to be. And as we continue to study these leadership characteristics of Christ, I want us to continually ask ourselves these questions and apply these things as very best we can from week to week. This morning, if you have any need in your life, the chief of those needs being, if you're not a follower of Christ, let today be the day that you confess Him and put Him on in baptism and become one of these ambassadors. Become one of these leaders and begin following Christ, but also being like Christ to the world around you. Or if there's a way we can pray for you this morning, we'd love to do that as well at the invitation. If there's any way we can serve you, come on up as we stand and as we sing.